Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's live session. This session is brought to you by the team at India's leading automotive events, Commercial Vehicle Forum, Two-Wheeler Forum, and Passenger Vehicle Forum. Today's session promises to be an absolute masterclass, given the fact that the speaker for today's session are joining us from some of the leading names of the industry, including L&T, Bosch, Siemens, IBM, Wipro, Here Technologies, you name it. And also given their experience, they're an absolute five-star rated faculty on IoT. They have all joined us today to help us answer your query on navigating the maze of scale, economy, and performance while implementing IoT and tracking solutions. So before we begin today's session, I wanted to take this time to especially thank our partner, Here Technologies, for supporting this session. As most of you are already aware, is a location data and technology platform which moves people, businesses, and cities forward by harnessing the power of location. And by leveraging their open platform, they empower their customers to achieve better outcomes, be it from helping a city manage its infrastructure or a business optimize its assets to guiding drivers to their destination safely. To learn more about Here, you can visit here.com. Now, coming to the agenda for today's session, we will be having a panel discussion and we'll run few polls during this session. Then finally, we'll close with an audience Q&A and brief presentation at the end. So before we start this session, just wanted to share a small ground rule with you all. I would request all you attendees to direct any questions that you may have to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. I'm asking you to do that as it helps us refer to your questions in a focused manner. In fact, you can also upvote for these questions so that we can address the most burning topics. So please note once again, questions to be entered in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I would now like to introduce our expert speaker group. Our first speaker for the session is Mr. Bhanwarlal Bishnoi, who is currently working with L&T Electrical and Automation as Head Embedded Design and Development. He has also worked as General Manager R&D at Toshiba in the past and has over 2 decades of experience in core research and development in electronic industry, both with Indian companies as well as MNCs. Our second speaker for the day is Mr. Ajat Shatru Kotwal. He has more than 12 years of experience in the IoT and tech sector and is currently working as the Director of Product Management Supply Chain at Here Technologies. Our next speaker is Mr. Sachin Sanghi. He has 25 years of experience across automotive and enterprise digitalization domains. He started his career with a 10-year stint at General Motors in Michigan in the 90s, and for the past 10 years has been associated with Siemens. In his current role as Director, MindSphere IoT Ecosystem and Partnership at Siemens, he's actively working with the industry for adoption of cloud and Internet of Things for applications such as connected products, including connected vehicles and connected shop floors. Next, we have Mr. Ashish Khari, who is the General Manager and Global Head for IoT and Smart City in Wipro. He has over 28 years of experience. In fact, he is the brain behind IoT platform IP Wipro Smart iConnect. He's a renowned business leader who is a tech enthusiast and a speaker in leading world forums, and in fact has even published papers in IoT and smart city space. Next up, we have Mr. Uday Prabhu, who manages the connected products and digital labs Internet of Things solutions and innovation team at Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions. He currently holds the position of head of digital labs there and has over 28 years of experience, of which the past 14 years have come with Bosch. And finally, we have Mr. Sandeep Datta. Sandeep has led the launch of IoT division for IBM in India, and prior to that, Watson for the industrial sector. He has more than 21 years of experience and is our moderator for the session. Over to you, Sandeep.
Thanks a lot, Rohit. And good afternoon, everyone, and warm welcome to all of you. And thank you, CVF, for organizing this event and Here Technologies for being our sponsor. So as Rohit mentioned, the topic of the webinar today is navigating the maze and of scale, economy, and performance, implementing IoT tracking solutions. And I'll be your moderator for this. So there are currently, if you look at almost 7.6 billion people on the earth, right? So out of that, almost 3.7 billion are connected to the internet, and 24% of that resides in India, right? So the market potential, if we talk of IoT in India itself, is predicted to be around close to 15 billion as per NASSCOM by 2020-2021, right? And we are seeing our automotive sector, right, taking a big leap in India in the IoT with major companies like Maruti, Honda, Hyundai, or even MG coming up with their connected car solutions as factory fitted for the market, right? And that shows that there is a growing acceptance within the consumers for smart applications. So it's no longer an option now, but a must-have, right? So what we'll do is that before we go to our esteemed panelists, so maybe Rohit, if you can just start with our first poll of the day, and while you put that question up, yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah. So this is our first poll of the day, and where we want you to come up with, because we have a mixed set of people. So have you already implemented IoT solutions already at your business? Now, while we get the answers, and I think in the next 30 seconds kind of thing, so I'll start with our first question for the panelists, right? So my first question is that how IoT is connecting assets and individuals for tracking and having an end-to-end visibility in this complex world with a secure network and without compromising on data privacy. So, and if you can further elaborate on, how can the problem of poor connectivity signals, right, which is, we face quite often in India, that can be addressed. So maybe Mr. Uday, if you can just take a shot at this question, and I would like to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sandeep, and welcome everybody. Pleasure being here. And as I was chatting with the other panel members, one good thing for IoT is that the commercial vehicles are right now running, right? So that's important. Unless the trucks run, you will not have any use for these tracking devices. So that's a positive sign. Also is an important thing for the economy. So when we talk about tracking, I just took a small model of the truck. We are tracking a lot of topics, right? We are tracking the location of the vehicle. Now we are tracking the consignment of the vehicle itself. What is it that it is carrying? How much is it carrying? We're also looking at the health of the asset that it is carrying, right? Now, for example, now the COVID scenario is creating a lot of attention to the refrigeration aspects during transit of these medicines. Now, are we ensuring that this refrigerated content is refrigerated from point A to point B, and it has not suffered any pitfalls during the time, which makes the vaccines actually irrelevant. Then, of course, you're also tracking the cost aspect of the entire truck, right? So this industry is extremely cost driven, right? The cost of fuel, cost of maintenance, cost of the various parts which are out there, health of this thing, and reliability of the truck going from point A to point B, in addition to the tracking of the consignment itself. So it's important to look at it from multiple angles, right? One is from the fleet which is owning the truck. Is he able to improve his CPKM, right? Cost per kilometer of transfer. Is he able to make adequate money? Is he able to use IoT to identify his pitfalls and his losses in terms of, say, engine performance, or tire health, or fuel efficiency, whether he's taking all this into consideration and he's not missing anything. So his cost per kilometer is lowest, right? That is from the vehicle owner's perspective. Then there is the driver's perspective. Is he driving okay? Is he ensuring that he's sticking to the right speeds? Is he damaging the vehicle easy, safe, and whether the vehicle safety translates to driver safety. That is another level of tracking. As actually in Europe, legislation is being introduced to monitor how much a driver is actually driving per day, right? There are strict labor laws there, right? Whereas we don't have much here. So there are bringing about the mechanism of having a trip recorder by driver, right, to see how much is he actually traveling. And then there is the consignment aspect of it, right? The consignment falls under multiple categories. I just need a consignment transaction report, right? How long did it take to travel? Were there any behavioral issues? Did it fall down? Did the refrigeration go off, right? And many such things. And do I need a trip record or do I need real-time tracking? That's a big decision to make, right? Because these are, say, covered devices. Vehicles are completely covered. It's it's a metal box, so it's a Faraday cage for engineers. That nothing escapes the Faraday cage. So how do I communicate consignment data which is inside, right? So there are so much connectivity issues which are nothing to do with the network, but to do with the way the consignment is fit into a truck, right? So in such a truck, for example, it's completely enclosed. So there has to be a decision process of do I need real-time information, or can I push intelligence to the edge? So edge analytics of the devices becomes very important, of the IoT devices, that I connect all the information. I have local alerting systems, maybe an alerting system just informing the driver that refrigeration has gone down, for example, and enough data that is collected so that this can be used, for example, in insurance or as a record of nothing has happened. So insurance plays a big role in also adopting IoT for such things, right? So various factors. Coming to connectivity, network is of course expected to be patchy because the trucks go through multiple scenarios.
Sorry, Uday, there is a freeze, I think.
Yeah, Sandeep, I think he might have gotten disconnected.
Yeah,
So
correct.
maybe I can launch
So
the poll, and I can maybe launch the poll in the meantime.
sure.
What do you say?
Yeah, definitely.
So these were the results for the poll.
Great. So I think we got a good majority of people who have already implemented.
Is whether the devices are able to collect data and record.
Okay, Uday, we got you back. Can you hear us clearly? Has it got freezed again?
I think his.
So fine. I think so Uday has given us some very good perspective. So one is basically, I think, if I can just sum it up, right? So which is very important is that the different personas who are will be the potential users. If I look at on the connected commercial vehicle side, he touched about vehicle owners, the drivers, the insurance companies, the OEMs, right? And he definitely discussed about on the edge computing side as well. So just to take it forward, since we also have AJ here, or maybe I can just, before I go to AJ, maybe Ashish, if you want to just add something more to what Uday was mentioning on this.
Yeah, sure, Sandeep. So if we look at the two key parts, let me talk about the connectivity aspect.
Mm-hmm.
While there are the general physical aspects which are related to the way the goods need to be tracked and the position and location and other things, communication technologies also are undergoing significant transformation. So we are now getting into a age where we can choose communication options based on what and how we want to do. Whether we want precision tracking, we want tracking at a say granular level, or what is the level of accuracy we want, we can choose. Communication options like V2X is getting adopted fast. We look at NB-IoT and Sigfox and LoRa, that again is bringing a different kind of options when it comes to communicating with various devices and having a continuous trail while things are on the move. So it's not about status update alone. It can be on the move in a cost-effective manner. Things can be done. So adoption of these tracking technologies onto multiple use cases with better AI and analytics based outcome is going to increase, in my view, looking at the way communication transformation is happening. And 5G is also not a long way to go. It's already knocking the door. So with 5G further coming in, this will further improve.
So, so Ashish, so who is actually putting the money in this space? Is it like, is it the OEM? Is it the insurance provider? Is it the commercial vehicle owner? So, as per you, who is actually looking at investing? If I look at just one area, maybe, we can, because Uday started with that on the commercial vehicle space. So what is your perspective on that?
Look, so as much as communication is concerned, that is coming in shared network form. So either service provider or OEM. If we talk about Sigfox and LoRa, the OEM along with their partners are putting in money, and that applies to India very well now. Because Sigfox is rolling out their network fast in India. LoRa is already on the cards, and they are expanding to tier 2, tier 3 cities now. So these are more of OEM driven or LoRa alliance driven kind of things. But NB-IoT and 5G, of course, service providers have larger interest. And that will float many options for consumers to adopt. So within NB-IoT, there might be 2 or 3 service providers available in each country, so that people can choose their options based on service, and they can demand quality of service accordingly.
Thanks, Ashish, for your perspective. So now my next question would be most to AJ. So AJ, what I would like to hear from you, your perspective is that what is the importance of location in Industry 4.0, right? And how location can bring more efficiency and productivity, especially accessing GPS locations and other locations as some inherited risk, right? And it is what we have seen also in many of the things, that it's not always very, very accurate as well, right? And we had some incidents also of data breach in the past. So how to ensure that the implemented solutions are secure, and especially, when you are looking at human tracking or workforce tracking, so there is always a concern that are we getting into the the privacy breach kind of a scenario. So what's your perspective, especially around this area? So if AJ, you can give your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Sandeep. A very, very relevant question. So before I answer that, the fact that location is so ubiquitous, it's used everywhere. I think people don't even realize it. But a very simple way of seeing that is, if everybody has the latest iPhone and Android, every time you use an app, even if it is an app to brush your teeth, it asks for location. So that's how important location has become right now, because everyone and everything wants to know where you are. Right now, take that from the consumer space into the industrial space, where there is more money at stake, where there is more compliance at stake, where there is more liability at stake, and location becomes even more important, right? So in Industry 4.0, literally starting from the point where a good is manufactured somewhere inside a factory, you have to start tracking it to know where it is in order to make it efficiently go from manufacturing to distribution to final retail, right? And one of the biggest examples that we have seen is while doing this in Europe, in Americas, everywhere, is that when people start thinking about their supply chain, their movement of goods in terms of locations, the first thing they find is hotspots in the supply chain that they never knew existed, right? So the best way I can explain is with an example. We were basically tracking a huge fleet of cars for an automotive manufacturer. Right now, that's automotive manufacturer, one of the biggest manufacturers in the world, knows their supply chain. They know how the cars go. What they don't know is what happens to the cars as they are being transported and distributed and being finally, let's say, put in the hands of the dealerships. So as the cars on the move, right, they reach a port, and at the point of the port, somebody comes with the scanner in the hand and scans the car. And as per the manufacturer, it's in the port, it's onboarded. But when you have location as part of it, then you can see the car is not put on a container ship. It's literally sitting on the port for 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. In some cases, it even misses its container slot, right? So the ship goes away while the car is still there. Now, this is what happens when you start putting location into real-time data, right? Another important, very important aspect of location is when you start tracking your supply chain, you can find out deviations, right? So, right, Uday was mentioning in the beginning, there is deviations in conditions. So, what's happening inside the truck, if the good is damaged, etc., etc. But what happens if the truck that is supposed to carry your goods is deviating from a path, right? So instead of going through a certain city, a certain state, for some reason it's deviating. So because you add location in the mix, the, the manufacturer, by the way, the manufacturer who's always transporting the goods has the least amount of control in the supply chain. And because of location, he knows where his goods are. So this is what location does. Location gives a manufacturer, a shipper context about where the goods are going. And as and when this keeps on happening more and more and more, machine learning comes into the picture. So a shipper can proactively say, I know these are the hotspots in my shipment track, in my shipping lane, and I know how to avoid them, right? So this is where location really comes in. Now, the question of how risky it is and how safe is it, that's a very, very valid question, because to be very, very honest and frank, hacking into an IoT-based system, especially a consumer-based IoT-based, is not the most difficult part, let's put it this way, right? So a lot of way companies are coming and overcoming this problem is by having their own firmware established inside any generic IoT tracker. And this is what we are also doing, right? So take any mark, and most of these trackers anyways, we all know they don't even come from China, they come from a very specific point in China, which is Shenzhen, right? So one of the things that we are doing right now is we're trying to make sure a lot of industries moving towards a point where they have firmware, irrespective of where the hardware comes from, they are trying to have firmware inside the hardware that is encrypted and end-to-end talking into their own cloud, right? So even if a certain party comes in and tries to hack the data, it is not that easy, right? So that's one of the ways things are, people are trying to overcome this problem. And in terms of people tracking or workforce tracking, now, unfortunately or fortunately, COVID has sort of taken the fear out of a lot of people in terms of personalized tracking. And I know it's not a big concern in APAC for sure, but here in Europe, a lot of people were not willing earlier to have their location tracked, right, because of privacy concerns. So right now what's happening is, I think the people are getting educated about the fact that you can track your location and still have it anonymized, right? Somebody can track you but still not know who is this person, which I think is another good way of telling people. So in a lot of cases, we are actually telling companies, we're telling workforces that the overall combined benefits of tracking a workforce anonymously is much, much more than somebody breaking in and stealing their identity, because the way data is stored is anonymized, right? So that's one of the ways we're trying to overcome this. Education is extremely important, because I think a lot of people still, for very rightful reasons, associate sharing something from their location, from their phone, with personal identification. So I think education has to be the key here.
Correct. No, I totally agree with you. And I think that's the way I think we are also moving forward on this, right? So, and slowly that concern on privacy breach is moving, because anyway, I think that data, knowingly or unknowingly, we are already sharing in various ways to various providers, right? So, and if somebody can, come up with something that, okay, I'm taking it willingly, I think, we are now more educated enough to, adopt that as well. So thanks a lot, AJ, for that perspective.
Thank you.
So let me again go back to Sachin. And Sachin, my next question is for you, and maybe Ashish, you can also join in as you after that. So data generated through this IoT tracking device, right, is mostly unstructured at the outset, right? So, and we hear a lot of around that volume, variety, and velocity, the 3 V's we call it, right? Mostly associated with the way that data gets generated from the IoT. And now if I combine that with the big data with IoT, it adds another layer to derive the effectiveness from the IoT solution, because otherwise, and that's how you get the value out of it, right? So how to leverage that, that we, and why it is important that we, combine the data streaming that is happening from the IoT along with, the big data, and then derive the value of it. So what according to you is the most critical factor for that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Sandeep, and it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion and this panel. You do bring up a very important point about the volume, variety, and velocity, and having all of these combined is really what gives the most value to how you use that data. And there are various solutions available on how you deal with this issue of having a large volume, variety, and velocity, right? So it essentially, if you see, it boils down to a build versus buy conversation. A lot of the ability to handle this can be built, but as a user who wants to apply this, want to use this data, apply artificial intelligence, big data technologies, you have to choose till what extent are you going to invest in how far back you're going to continue to invest. You can build a lot of these different protocols into one platform yourself, or the other a way of dealing with this, if your focus is on getting the different streams available for you to start applying tools immediately, then one should look for certain kind of platforms. Today there are many platforms available that provide you with a variety of standards that connect to industrial edge devices. They give you out of the box security standards, right? We're going to discuss about it more. These platforms also allow you to incorporate seamlessly other systems where you have previously collected data, for example. So it could be your historians on the shop floor, or it could be the legacy device, or a conjunctive system along with it. So these are some of the characteristics or points that become very necessary to handle in terms of the critical factors. And now when you put all of these different protocols together, you also need to have an ease of scaling up and scaling down both. Because as you embark on these IoT journeys, there will be situations where you need to scale up for some time, and then once you have the solution, you scale down and you then deploy horizontally. One also needs to start looking into this is how are you integrating with future needs? Like AJ just mentioned, now there is anonymized location that is available. So these may again be different types of data that is coming in. So how do you do this? How do you protect yourself for the future needs integration, right? So lastly, I would say that one good way to deal with it, I always talk about with a lot of people in the industry. I talk about it is that it's better to start with a small scale pilot usually. So when you deal with combining different streams of data sources, it's not a bad idea to discuss with your teams, with the ecosystem, with the suppliers in the industry, and put all these maybe 4 or 5 top different streams together, combine them, get to understand how the data flows, and then how easy it is, what needs to be done to the data so that you can start applying the big data techniques.
Great. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. So before I move to Ashish, so Rohit, can we run the next poll as well? Okay. So while Rohit comes up with that, maybe Ashish, your perspective on this would be also very helpful for the audience.
Yeah, so Sandeep, what I believe that with edge becoming more, so the poll is there. Let's take this up.
Yeah. So what the poll is more about, what is preventing organizations from implementing IoT? Is it cost? Is it network issue? Is it problems with standardization? Not able to build a business case, or haven't thought of about it yet. So while the people answers that, so maybe Ashish, why don't you take your bit on it, right? So if I ask you to, I am sure while it is a 0 or 1 kind of a thing, but if I ask you, I think all of them are relevant, right? So how would you order it as per you, right? What you put at number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
So Sandeep, if I look at this poll, problem for every individual is different. So, and
Correct.
it's location based or country based, area based also, because many places network becomes a fundamental challenge. And that's an issue in most of the countries, not just India. So it's not that we have perfect connectivity in Europe and US. There also there are challenges. Although we may have challenge in metros as well, they may have challenge in outskirts. That's the only difference. So location perspective is the key here. Now coming back to the point which we were on, Edge is growing big, and Edge capabilities in terms of AI, in terms of analytics, is going big. And that means that we can apply 3Ds to data and then see that how that unstructured data is chosen and taken up. So discovery, of course, is the key. So discover, decode, and discard. Now, if we apply that, and this adoption is increasing big time, so we can curb some of the data which need to flow. While in case of a tracking, time series data is important, and in many use cases, this has to anyway flow, whatever the edge analytics or AI you apply. For multiple other historical and other analytics, or say trip playback kind of applications. So use of big data, of course, is a thing which has to be evaluated properly. Depending on the volumetric an organization is looking at, they can choose whether big data is the best option for them in this scenario. Because unstructured data handling in a standard databases comes with its own challenge and cost both.
Correct. No, if I put my perspective, I think, we get more value, right, when, we add, big data into the data that is coming from IoT kind of thing, rather than trying only to build some value only from the IoT data itself, right? Because that is basically I'm getting something, which is real time, whether it's an asset, whether it's a machine, whether it's a car or whatever. But unless I put some perspective, right, from outside to that to enrich that data, right? So for example, now we are talking a lot of cars, right? So if I'm trying just to look at, the accelerometers, all those machine parameters, hertz braking, and all those things, those becomes more relevant when I club that with something like a map matching kind of thing from here or somebody, right? That under what situation I am doing it, right? So if I am moving from a small lane to a highway, maybe hertz acceleration is the best driving behavior, right? Because otherwise you might get hit from a car behind, right? So otherwise, if I just look at, okay, he suddenly moved from 30 to 60, so he's a bad one, right? That may not be a correct interpretation, right? So thanks Ashish for that perspective. So moving on, I think we heard a lot, and we have seen it in the past as well, that there is a lot of issues, especially on the security side of when you talk on the IoT, and there are multiple areas where we can look at where the security can be breached, right? So it can happen at the device level, right? It can happen while the data is getting transported kind of thing, or it can be happen at the application level as well, right? So it is one of the, and we have seen situations in the past as well. I just remember that there was one case study in Tesco, right? Where some hackers, they just hacked the HVAC machine, and through that actually they got into the posh machines of the stores, and they could steal all the data from the security, the credit card information for almost 30 million people, right? So that's basically, how important is the security when we get into this solution. So my question to Sachin is that how critical do you think that these data-related security policies are for the success of IoT solutions?
So Sandeep, thanks for the question. It is indeed, it does get a lot of attention, cybersecurity, but in my opinion, it needs to be considered even more. Even the attention to cybersecurity needs to be given even further more by service providers, by the consumers themselves. And if we separate out the three aspects that you talked about, as one is the security of the automation system or the edge device itself, and then there is security concern with the transmission of the data, and then third comes where it has been stored at the application level. So a lot of time, and AJ again mentioned that how easy it is today to hack into an IoT device. It can be questionable today. However, there are certain things that one can keep in mind when they select such systems. So at the edge, there are a couple of characteristics of a secure system. I would just like to discuss a little bit about that. One is there should be separate physical interfaces at the edge devices. So any connectivity interfaces that you're providing to more than one, inputs or outputs, you should physically separate them. That helps you become more secure on your hardware, right? Secondly, to any kind of a system that is a control system, it should only be given read-only access. So that these hygiene factors prevent, in the case of some kind of a breach, and makes your system even more secure. Your hardware, there is security hardened hardware that you can look for and you can design, you can use, and definitely security hardened hardware should be used. On the other side, any kind of security when you're building, you should always also look at building firewall friendly connectivity within your own application. So whether we are talking about taking data from the edge and then transmitting it further to the cloud. So that is really at the edge level, that's some of the key characteristics. If one keeps that in mind, you're protecting yourself from a lot of vulnerabilities. When it comes to data which is in transmission, again, as both the encryption and the decryption technology is increasing, but securing it through during the transmission stage is still something that you can make use of. It is by just acquiring the highest level encryption standards, and the data there is only for a limited amount of time. So for that duration, when you have it really works out. The third aspect comes is once it is in the cloud storage, who's having access to it. Security is not just some hacker trying to get into it and trying to create a disastrous situation. Security is a lot more than that. So there is a discussion, there is a narrative in the industry that if I am the consumer and I have a connected vehicle, or if I'm a fleet owner and I have my vehicles or my supply chain, who's owning the IP?
Okay. Yeah.
Who should I trust with?
Who is owning the data, maybe, right?
Absolutely. And who should I trust with it? Who do I as a consumer feel is the most trustworthy party that I would say that, okay, you can have access to my location because you're giving me a safe operation of my supply chain or my personal vehicle. So I think that there are some research and surveys out there that say that that customers would tend to trust the OEMs the most when it comes to vehicular data. So I don't know how that how much that how does that pan out, but today it seems like the OEMs are the best suited party to say that we will own and protect the data for everybody else.
Correct. No, very good perspective, Sachin. So let me move on. So Rohit, have you published the result of the last poll? I think you have not yet, right? Yeah. Okay. So great. I think we got a very, very mixed answer. So Sachin, why don't you take a call? What according to you on this, and then maybe we'll go along all of our panelists as well. So which one you would have chosen out of this?
Yeah, so Sandeep, I would choose not being able to build a business case internally because most other things are solvable and have been solved.
Correct. No, I think, that's, I would have also chosen that primarily because I think many times we have seen that, especially with this POC thing, right? People just start to do, right, okay, let us start a pilot, but without a goal, right? Let me connect some assets and see that, and now it is becoming very easy to do that. But, the challenge is happening is that, because you have not identified the business case, you have not identified, for example, who is the target audience or the persona for that, who will be consuming it, and is it that valuable that he is ready to pay for it, right? Because we have seen that, for example, in connected car scenario, one OEM in India, they launched first, and one of the use case they came up with is that, like find your car. Now that's not something which I am going to pay, 500 rupees every month just to know where my car is. That may be a big problem, maybe, in a country like US where you have a big parking lot and all those things, right? But that is not something which appeals to me, that, that for that which, I am going to, subscribe to that and I will pay for it, right? So it has to be something which is, made for me and where I see a value, right? So that's where comes that, what is the business case and what's the value that we bring in for the various persona. So AJ, what's your call? Which one you would have chosen?
I would have actually chosen the same one, the business case, and I think what you said, Sandeep, was very, very relevant. So I see like there's two problems here, right? So the first problem is a lot of companies just blanket force the solution on people, right? So exactly the point you said. The problem of finding a car in the US is very relevant, not so much in India, other parts of the world where it's not as big, right, physically. The other part is even the people who are trying to implement IoT in their own factories, they, I think, sometimes sort of don't go beyond what is the value of just tracking a specific asset, right? So a lot of time I hear the questions, I don't want to put a $50 asset tracker on a $10 asset, right? But the point is always, it's not about tracking the $10 asset, it's about tracking what happens when the $10 asset carrying something that's more expensive gets lost. What happens when you can't find that $10 asset in time and your shipment has to be going out, right? So these are the things I think that have to be also taken care about on both sides. So it's targeted use cases for the customer based on their needs, on their location. And on the user side, I think it's also very important to understand that putting IoT into one asset or into one workflow impacts a lot of other things, right? It's a ripple. So I think it's a problem. Again, we keep on saying it's an education problem, but it is an education problem, right? Because it's now coming into so many different regions, right? And this is what happens to every industry initially, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, thanks a lot. Thank you, AJ, for that great perspective. So, Howard, I will bring you in. What's your call on this?
Yeah. So I think, business case is most important because any activity we do for gain and we do for, generating the business and revenues. So if I understand, right perspective, like if I want to, track a machine, which is $1,000, and if I put a $2,000 to track that machine, it is an unviable business case. So first, I mean, it can be, if I want to track a $1,000 machine, and if it is a $10 as a, sensor and all operational cost, so it makes a pretty sense. So it is like, premium of the insurance and the sum value of the insurance. So like a term insurance, so you give the, you have a most risk covered while you invest minimum. So similar way, building a, business case and ROI, basically, because return on investment, and breaking the silos in the business, because every department and every function in the business, because they will become a vertical silos, and to generate the maximum value, management will be always keen to bring the maximum output from the minimum resources in the organization. So that is where there will be thousands of ideas in the organization, but which idea to be picked up first and which ideas to be taken later. So there will be a ranking and prioritization in terms of outcome, So there can be a business metrics where which idea will give with the minimum investment maximum output, and within a maybe shorter period of the time. So those can be taken as a first POCs or pilot kind of thing. And because that will build a rhythm in the organization, because in management demonstration is the key. And if we are able to demonstrate the the output with the putting the idea with the lower resource and effort cost, so that will generate the maximum ripple, and it will have a cascading effect in people who are non-believer. Like IoT can make a difference. So there are long term and short term. So there could be prioritization in terms of short term and long term. So long term, if I see, like as you already said, like edge analytics, and then the big data analytics, which is at the cloud. So I mean, and there is a latency effects also, like data is flowing from the edge or maybe the last device, which is like sensor or node, to the cloud, and then from cloud to back. So centralized and decentralized. So there needs to be a hybrid mixture of decentralized as well as the centralized approach, where it is focused on the monetizing the IoT data. So because at the end we are doing all these efforts to monetize the IoT data. And in case of commercial vehicle segment, let's say connected car, or it may be let's say the fleet owner. So fleet owner and the driver. So the expectation of the different stakeholders in the ecosystem is also very useful, because driver will have a different expectation than the fleet owner actually. And sometimes it could be in the they could be in the conflict also. So there is a, like every stakeholder should find a value, then that is a sustainable in very long term. And for piloting, there can be some seed money in the organization, and that seeding can be done to demonstrate maybe small period project. But at the end, it has to generate the revenue what is expected, and it should be self sustainable, and it should bring even in the P&L, it should add the money back.
And I think somewhere like sometimes we tend to overdo things as well. I'll just give you a couple of examples, right? Like I know there are few organizations in India who are coming up with something like smart fan. Okay, it sounds good. Okay, you can use your mobile to start your fan, make it but if I have 4 fans, one from Havel, one from Compton in Man, are you thinking of me as a consumer having 4 mobile apps to control each of my fans, and then another set for my AC, another from my telephones, or another from my televisions. So somewhere I think that while it's good to ride on the tide, but we have to also look at the value that we can bring in on the table for the consumer, because I may use it at the once or twice, but ultimately how much time I will is it more okay to go to and switch it on and off, or rather finding that mobile app that Havels have given me. Uday, I think you would have some story there.
I think the topic of business case has to be looked at it from the ecosystem point of view, right? Let me take up a topic that is less talked about, infrastructure, right? So you're going from point A to point B in a commercial vehicle. The business case for an enterprise is, how can I go from point A to point B in the least amount of time, right? And this is beneficial for the enterprise. It's low cost to the truck owner, and of course the economy moves faster. Now this topic of infrastructure, let's take India for example, creates this point A to point B to be very far apart, because the roads are bad, a lot of say tolls in between, and and time is therefore money. So the business case should also be, if you standardize tracking, can this information be taken to generate a data map which will be then presented to, for example, the government, to say that no, you are not doing your job of making point A to point B shorter, right? So this data has to come of use, because finally what we're talking about is cost. So IoT tracking is a cost finally to everybody, right? Especially except for those who are trying to sell it, of course, right? So it's a cost for the truck, it's a cost for the enterprise who are wanting to track it, it's a cost for the final end product, right? You're bumping up the cost. and if this is not used to tackle the problems, right? For example, infrastructure causes damage to your truck. Infrastructure causes a loss of time. Infrastructure causes an issue to your equipment because it has to go through those bumpy terrain. So if this
Even your
information is
fuel
used,
also.
yeah, if it is used in a way that will impact the transportation sector, improve the infrastructure sector, then there is a business case which the government also can look into. Insurance can also pitch in. So it has to be thought of as a broader ecosystem. Otherwise, there is one enterprise who is breaking their head, trying to absorb the cost of this time loss. The trucker is going to add that cost to his segment. So finally, everything is going up. So it has to mean somewhere in infrastructure.
Thanks. That brings a very great perspective to this. So I'll go back to Bhavar. So Bhavar, what we are seeing is that especially this COVID and post-COVID kind of a situation, if I may say that. So more than 50% of India's corporate leaders believe that now that IoT to be more imperative for them to be digitally fit, right? But at the same time, we are seeing that in the organization we have disjointed silos kind of still exist, right? Processes where we are still doing a lot of manual entry of data. So how can these disjointed silos be connected so that we can deliver scale and efficiencies of IoT? So Bhavar, if you can just give your perspective on this.
So I mean, because the data generation first is like, the architecture where like what is, end outcome which we are targeting. So I mean, it is like, top up and bottom down, both approaches needs to work together to bring the best sweet spot in terms of breaking the silos. So management will have one expectation, or the business owner will have one expectation, and the other people in the ecosystem also will have the other expectations. So how all these dots can be joined together to derive the best value from the problem. So identification of the problem, and then what are the joined silos which is affecting that problem not to be addressed. So identification of those, and then how those can be resolved, so that the end user, it could be end user as a government also, it could be end user as a user also, or it could be a organization head, basically, who is looking to generate some profit from the execution of that idea. So let's say the operational efficiency, or let's say the data flow within the organization, if let's say the is a issue. So if there is a digital dashboard, and where all these datas are flowing from top down or bottom up, or horizontally or vertically. So it is like how the shortest data travel time which is being taken, and how the decisions are agile actually, because agile is a way of life, because then only we can achieve the best outcome. So that is where I believe design, sales, marketing, maybe the the service team, maybe the quality, maybe the manufacturing. So there are different functions within the organization, and how they are well connected digitally, because that is where if you see the traditional method of information exchange, or traditional method of working, is like is not that effective and efficient. So if let's say machines, if you want to track how is the OEE of machines, so if machines are 98%, 99% OEE versus the 50% OEE, so it is very easy to pinpoint like which machine has the lowest OEE. So then we know, like we can track the issues
Where
around
we
that
can
machine,
put our focus on.
focus on that. And so those are the spots where we can look at, and then we can see what are the issues around and why there are issues. So those are the issues where silos can be identified, and then those can be fixed up to achieve the overall organization goal. And at the end, bottom line and top line, so those are the one which is part of the P&L. So how they are getting in more and more better shape. So that's what is my take on that.
Very perspective. Yes. Thanks a lot. So Rohit, if you can just put up the next poll for us. So while it does that, Yeah, okay, it has come already. So what benefits do you see for your business from the implementation of IoT solution? Cost reduction, efficiency, new business opportunities, better customer experience, improved adaptability to changes. So, Bhavar, you want to take your take on it? Which one you would choose? And then I'll go to Ashish.
So low hanging fruit is operational efficiency and productivity. So that is the best low hanging fruit, which can be as a low hanging fruit. So there are long term fruits which is based on customer experience in terms of, let's say, car showroom. So I mean, customer in COVID era, he may not want to travel to different location to experience. So there could be a artificial intelligence and virtual reality based car showroom where he can have full car experience through AI or VR, basically virtual reality, augmented reality. So that is where he can experience, and that can give the similar experience what physical showroom can give. And when the situation normalizes, maybe he can so right now he want to buy a car, and that will serve the purpose. And that is where digital platform provides the facilitation.
Exactly. I think this question will I would put it in a pre-COVID situation or a post-COVID situation. The answers will be different, to at least for me, right? Right now I think all organizations are struggling for selling their stuff, right? So we have enough inventory, or we know how to so maybe if I have 100 rupees, I will not put it on cost reduction right now. Rather, I would put it more on either creating a differentiating products, or or as you rightly mentioned, right, can I create a digital or a virtual showroom kind of thing, right? Because ultimately I have to look at my revenue part first, especially in this current scenario. Maybe and pre-COVID, maybe that was the situation that where you would see that more focus was on Industry 4.0 and others, right? So with that, I think I'll go to Ashish. So Ashish, this pandemic has brought about a change in people's perspective, especially around the proximity visualization and tracking. Okay, so how this is going to be used in various industries, and what would be the next norm around that? So I would like you to wrap it in maybe 3-4 minutes, kind of.
Sure, Sandeep. Let me be quick on this. So, COVID, in my view, from that perspective, is the blessing because it has changed people's view towards some of these tracking and locations data and other aspects. So it's rightly said that necessity is the mother of invention. So that's where the invention has happened, and people have accepted largely. So anonymization, of course, is one of the things which people were not so much worried about earlier. But everybody who's looking at location, proximity, and tracking kind of things, they are looking at anonymization as a proposition, as a part and parcel of the solution.
Got it.
This contact tracing and social distancing kind of things, which are the core of COVID response from a technology perspective, are basically enabler for this because if you want to do effective contact tracing, you need to have people tracked. And that's where applications are launched at country levels and enterprise levels. So like at Wipro, we have come up with Health Cover, which is to take care of complete employee safety, including tracking within the campuses, which takes care of social distancing, local as well as long-term data, then contact tracing, then various other aspects which are not limited to distancing violation, but also from a perspective of which zone people have visited. Because ultimately in a premise where multiple number of people is high, you need to have that aspect also. So proximity is short term, but people passing by the same work area is another. So I would say that this is going to trigger larger adoption, and many use cases like connected worker, which was a major challenge earlier because of people acceptability, they are taking mass scale deployment, and many such things will come up.
No, I totally agree. And especially when I see the adoption of something like Arogyo Setu app, right, which is nothing but, actually what we are, sharing is basically my personal data, my location data. And the way I see the adoption that has happened in a very short period, I think, that, that innovativeness of, I will not give it kind of thing is slowly going. And that's, I think you rightly point out that pandemic has created that transformation, that it's not that risky to share that, because ultimately if it can bring some value to me, right, which
Yeah,
is
so
again,
exactly,
that's a very important.
like when we are taking our health over proposition to various markets, even in Europe, in US, people are accepting it. So it's not just APAC where people are still ready to share data. Countries where this was a major issue, they are open to share their data, of course, with anonymization. But ultimately, this tracking is becoming a reality now.
Sure, great. So Rohit, can you show the final poll result as well for us? Okay. So Ashish, what's your take on this?
So look, I would say benefit-wise, efficiency of productivity, of course, is one of the key things. But challenge remains that people normally, when they look at IoT use cases from adoption perspective and from benefit perspective, they have a limited view. People don't apply all the benefits which are direct and indirect both. And that's where sometimes business case also becomes weak. And one of the reasons behind that, to give it in 2 sentences, is that it is more of a use case and idea experimentation than an IoT strategy based approach. So the way IT strategy is done, IoT strategy is still a long way for most of the organizations.
Right. Thanks a lot, Ashish, and thanks to all my fellow panelists. So I think I am seeing that there are a lot of queries. There are questions that have come up from our participants. So Rohit, over to you, okay, for the next half an hour.
First question that remains open is from Mr. Devanand. Thank you so much for sharing, sir, your query. He asks, when do you think industry will be ready to implement IoT at scale, in a scale? Would anybody would like to take that?
I think I'll first take a shot on that. So I think, it is basically, which I started with, I think already industry have started taking it in scale. We are seeing, and it is going by industry, I would say. So, definitely the first one that comes to a mind, which is coming in a big scale, is basically the automotive sector, right? So as we said, right, Maruti is coming up with connected vehicle for every product that they're coming in, kind of thing in the market, right? That's, I call it as scale. Same thing with Honda. You will get a lot of ad, you will see for Honda City and others, right? MG, they, entered the market with that entire, theme of, internet vehicle or, smart, car, so I think, it is already, we are seeing it's no longer only POC kind of thing, right? So, and the reason, and automotive sector is what we have seen is that they're always one of the early movers, early adopters whenever there is any disruptive technology. And the same thing pattern is, already started. And I think there are others who are also starting in and, already embarking that journey, right? So that's my take, and I open to others as well for their comments.
So let me add to what Sandeep said. While auto is anyway leading on that, utility and energy sectors are also big adopters, and they are going for scale deployments. And it's not limited to smart metering. It's much more than that.
Right, especially with smart meter, smart grid, I think,
So there are sectors, as Sandeep said, and I'm taking few examples where scale deployments are happening. There are few other sectors where scales can be much bigger, and they are going bit slow. That I would put manufacturing in that bracket from my perspective, because the potential of IoT there versus what is done today, there is a gap, and that is something which is breaking fast, and people are realizing benefits. And with 5G enterprise coming in, this will grow significantly, because whatever those security concerns which people had, and that apprehension became a major issue in mass adoption in manufacturing, that will be broken with 5G enterprise coming in.
And I think just one more point. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I would like to add, Sandeep. Yeah, I would like to add one
Yeah,
more
sure.
aspect. Like, automobile has been always at forefront, like Ola, Uber are the live cases, use cases where the IoT has been deployed in a very, very, exponential way. And they were early adopters. But at the same time, there are different segments like, railways, there are different segments like electric utilities, like smart grids, or agricultural, the smart farming, or there are smart water, actually, like water systems, also like water distribution, also smart metering, and various kind of platforms which has been deployed, and they are at the forefront. So I mean, there are leaps and bounds are happening, but as the any new technology evolution, there is always viability gap. I mean, and if once the technology what is available and the use cases, if the viability gap is minimized, or it is very, very self-sustained, I mean, rather than subsidy driven. I mean, if there is a subsidy, then the technology becomes viable. Then it is not self-sustained. So once it becomes self-sustained and it is more players are in the market, then I think it is a self-sustained and it is going to go a long way, and it will evolve in a exponential growth, actually.
Okay.
Right. Very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Uday, I have noticed that you've been quite active on the Q&A section. So what I would request you to do is that while you have obviously answered a lot of these queries, if you could just maybe pick one, maybe elaborate for the larger group on one of those queries which you feel is if you that you thought was the best question, or the most relevant sort of.
Yeah, I think there was one question from Vishal Lakhani. I think it was a very useful question.
Yes.
Which is also a fact
So
that,
I'm just going to repeat the questions for the larger group. Okay. So Vishal Lakhani said technology has not been able to solve the grassroots level issues faced by the fleet owners. Many so-called aggregators are facing challenges of survival. How do you see these companies survive? So now they will be.
It's a great question because recently, a month ago, I was with Fleet, and he was saying that no, I don't think any truck owner is making money. I think everybody is in debt, and I don't know when they will come out of it. And I was just casually asking him, what exactly seems to be the problem. So it's considered as a cost, right? Transporting the goods is considered as a cost, and so they're beaten down significantly. And so what happens is all the costs are then pushed down the totem pole. You bring down the cost of labor, you bring down cost of maintenance, and try to make your ends meet. And no, it's a race to the bottom finally. So where IoT can play a role here is to help understand the leakages, right? As I mentioned, where is the leakage? Is the leakage in high fuel cost per kilometer? Is the leakage in poor infrastructure? Is the leakage in a lot of time wasted in, say, waiting for your for your transport, right? For your consignment? Is the problem that drivers are not driving well? No, or there is a lot of delays, at multiple checkpoints. So if this information can be collected by a neutral body, and this can be put to good use, that will say sort of improve the cost side of fleets, to make them more cost effective. Then I think it's a small movement of the needle that you can actually impact. But this is very true. A person who is losing a lot of money, and then parallelly you try to sell him another piece of technology, there will be a lot of aversion to climb onto that platform.
Sure. And AJ, I noticed you have also been quite active on that front. So if you could pick one more question and sort of answer it largely for the group as well.
Yeah, let me see which one. I think I got answered a couple. So yeah, so there was also one more question, which I think also ties into the other part about leakages and also finding, let's say, problems in the whole network. Is how can we use IoT data from vehicles to predict and avoid accidents, right? I think it's also answered by Mr. Ashish. But what I was telling is that so depending on the kind of vehicle, so commercial vehicle or it's a passenger vehicle, right? So a lot of passenger vehicles right now are doing this in different ways. They are basically transmitting hazardous signals and hazardous warnings, right? So for example, if a car brakes in a certain part of the road, that information goes to the last car if it's connected, right? So somebody knows that the next 500 meters are slippery or it's wet or something has happened, right? So instead of actually predicting an accident, it's more about avoiding accidents. And it's the same thing in commercial vehicles, at least as far as I have seen. What has happened now is that people are using IoT traces or trace data to figure out what are the hotspots where accidents can technically have happened in the past historically. And that information is basically given to the driver to basically tell them that, hey, this is where something has happened. Think about it as the Waze of enterprise. This is what Waze was doing. Waze was telling people where accidents have happened. And this is what we are doing and now bringing it to the commercial vehicle side to tell people this is where one accident happened. So people become more proactive. And instead of predicting accidents, we are avoiding accidents.
Okay, great. So I think we've answered most of the queries in terms of direct answers to all of those questions. So I think we can now move on to the AJ, you touched upon the location aspect when it comes to IoT and the importance of it. So if you could shed more light on that with in terms of your presentation, if you could sort of start with that.
Perfect. Thank you, Rohit. I'll get my presentation online.
No worries. And this is just for the audience in case you feel that any of your query, or if you'd want anybody to specifically answer and you weren't satisfied, feel free to shoot me an email. I will definitely connect you with the relevant person, and you can definitely get that.
So Rohit, if you can tell me if you can see my screen properly.
Yeah, I'm able to see your screen properly.
Awesome. So what I really want to do is based on the kind of discussion we've been having in this whole back and forth, I really want to focus on some points, and I don't want to literally bore anybody with PowerPoints, but I really want to get to a point where we are talking about real life examples. But before I do that, I just want to talk about the company a little bit, because Here Technology is one of those companies which is working at the, let's say, in a part of the value chain which is not really visible to everyone. Let's put it this way. So we are the location platform of the B2B world, right? Which means that we are serving multiple use cases, 48 to be as precise. We've got a huge developer presence. There are almost 250,000 developers directly coming to us and developing on our products, 3 million indirect developers, and approximately 80 billion API calls are hitting our backend every day. Right now, the reason it is so because we are basically present in every car navigation system, or 4 out of every car navigation system sold in Europe, North America, and also in some parts of APAC. This means that we have basically covered every part of the world when it comes to mapping and positioning, right? So venues have been mapped, cities have been mapped, routing is available for all of this. So this is really important for just to give everybody here a context for where Here Technology is, what we do. We basically make location data accessible to multiple use cases, and the data that we have is world leading. Now, this data again ties back to another question that you were having, is what's the importance of location in industry, in general, in every industry. And the reason we are addressing 48 use cases is not because you've got 48 business units inside the company, is because location is ubiquitous in so many different cases, like I was just saying, right? It's present everywhere. And in order to give value, it might not be the front and center of every value proposition, but it is the core enabler of so many value propositions that I would just like to show you. Focusing on just supply chain, what we are trying to do is we're trying to basically bring visibility into different processes. So what I would like to start is with shipment visibility. Now, this is something is relevant to especially big countries, multimodal routes that are going between point A and point B that are not easily predictable and monitorable, right? Now, the problem here is, before I actually get to an example, is that the transportation execution part, which is where the planning has happened, everything has happened, and you put a shipment into a truck or a container or a railway, anywhere, and that has to go from point A to point B. This transportation leg in the middle is some of the most least visible part of the whole supply chain, for both, in some cases for the trucker, for the carrier, in some cases for the shipper. So it's a big hot white spot where nobody has real visibility. So as a result of it, right, depending on different countries, these problems can vary. But generally speaking, there is always a problem of inaccurate multimodal ETA or inaccurate ETA in general. Like, it's very difficult to predict when my shipment is going to reach from both a carrier and a shipper perspective, right? In case there is damages to goods, nobody really knows when the damage happened and why it happens, right? You can also have stolen goods, and different kind of damages can happen. And more importantly, right, in cases where you are sending things via a container or via a railway, and there is some sort of handover involved, that's the most historically tricky part, right? Where goods are offloaded, and for a certain amount of time, there are in no transportation vehicle. They are either on the docks, they are either in the railway docks, or there are some place where they are just lying there. So that's the part where you really have to know where the goods are. And all this is done in an effort to make an unbroken chain of custody. Now, here technology has taken an approach which is quite flexible to a lot of needs. And this also was talking about the question that I saw one question of how do we do this end to end, right? And questions regarding network and capability. So this is how our whole combined ecosystem works, right? Here technologies is a successor to Nokia, right? We are born out of Nokia. So we are, apart from Google, the only company that can do positioning. Positioning is the dot that you see on the map, right? And that helps you find somewhere. So we take that secret sauce of ours, our positioning services, and that positioning services means that we can position any device using GPS, using GSM signals or cell signals, and using Wi-Fi. And we have all the Wi-Fi access points mapped all over the world. So we put that firmware into a sensor, into any sensor, right? We connect it to our platform, which is a real-time tracking platform, and it is connected to our other location services. And we make that accessible to developers or system integrators as APIs, or to an end customer as an end-to-end solution, right? Now, the idea here is we want to give a customer complete flexibility in order to implement it, because every customer has their own requirement. And we still don't want every customer to build a customized solution. So we call it the 90-10 solution, which is we bring the 90% of the solution to the customer and 10% is customizable. That makes it financially more feasible. Now, what I want to quickly do is to tell you how the here advantage really works and how it is working in a specific customer example. So we've got the best-in-class ETA because our services is built on ETAs. We are the ETA engine every time you get into a car and you put a destination that your car has to travel to, right? We also have the best-in-class positioning because we are using Wi-Fi, GPS, GNSS, and also cell signals. Now, the other part that we have is the ecosystem. So we are working with IoT partner networks based out of different parts of the world, and our own ecosystem, which is our location services, our developers, etc. And we bring what is required by the customer. So tomorrow, I can go to a customer that says, I need a $10 tracker. And I can also go to a customer that says, I need a $100 tracker because I need to track temperature, humidity, tilt, etc., etc. So we've got a hardware for every user need, right? And then we are selling tracking as a service. All of this is tied back to the question that you were answering: what is preventing IoT from taking off? And cost and business cases, and they're all linked, is one of the major questions. So one of the things we're doing to take away the cost is we are giving tracking as a service, right? Nobody has to pay for the hardware. What we do is we give you a package as a pay as you go. So you pay us a certain money and everything you get from us is on a lease. and then you give it back to us at the end of the lease. So this is all done to lower your total cost of ownership, because it's acknowledged that this is one of the bigger problems here. Now, to see how this works in real life, let me show you a customer example. Actually, we are helping customers, one of the biggest FMCG customers in the world, to get perishable goods to the market in time. And this is done in very, very simple 4 steps. We attach our low powered, really, because these are FMCG goods, it's literally toothpaste and toothbrushes. So nobody wants to put an expensive tracker here, right? We are putting trackers worth $20, $10 on assets, on containers that are carrying thousands and thousands of dollars of goods, right? Once we know where to put the tracker and which part of the shipment to abstract, then we start making, and this is applicable for everyone. We start making different geozones or different parts that are monitored for the shipment. In India, they could be different state boundary crossings or different ports or different warehouses, anything that the customer wants. Once this starts happening, a real-time meter comes up where we tell the customer about, or notify the customer about any deviation from the ETA, or if any sort of damage as specified by the customer has happened. Now, this could be a driver being late, a driver being deviated from the route, a major ETA deviation, or in some cases, a temperature fluctuation. Everything depends and is configurable based on the use case. But the step is always the same. You attach an asset, you manage the sites, you get notified for any sort of exceptions. Now, the other thing that is really important here is people were mentioning that they want to see IoT implemented so that they can measure efficiencies and the effect of implementing IoT. Now, let's be very clear, it's very difficult to measure productivity and efficiency. It's not something that you can do with a maths formula. So what we're also helping people is helping them get better at calculating their efficiency. So the last and the final step is we actually tell companies, irrespective of the company, irrespective of the route, of what is the bottleneck in their logistics, right? And a very, very simple example is here, right? This was shipments being transported from North America to South America. This company has been doing this for 60 years, right? And they know there were problems. However, when you start putting IoT in the picture, then you start seeing where is the problem, right? Which is very, very important. And at that point of time, who was the carrier and who was the person responsible for transportation, right? And this can be put across even for fleet owners. Like fleet owners can see why their fleets are not performing properly, right? Where are the points where my fleet is stopping unnecessarily, and where is the point where my fleet is not performing as expected? So we help to get efficiency and marketing KPIs allocated, right? It's very important to understand where efficiency is coming from. Now, this is about tracking the shipment. Now, another a very important aspect is you take the same technology and you use it for tracking mobile assets, right? This is anything that is from a truck to a reusable shipment, or a warehouse asset, or a field asset, even workforce, for example, right? All of these are mobile assets and they require a different kind of IoT solution, a different kind of connectivity solution, right? But it's still a very, very valid problem to solve for mobile assets. Now, lack of traceability and utilization, and unknown utilization is one of the main problems here, right? You have to know where your assets are going, whether it's a truck, whether it's a commercial truck, whether it's a container on a truck, right? You have to know where they are at any point of time, no matter how cheap they are, no matter how disposable they are, because what's happening is these assets are responsible for transporting your major shipment from point A to point B. You have to know where they are if you have to plan accordingly for your next shipment. Now, this is a problem all over the world that I have seen. A lot of people overcome this problem by brute forcing more inventory, right? So their idea about not having real-time visibility is, oh, I'll just get 50 more pallets or 10 more containers and it's still cheap. And that's the part where business cases also come in. So when everybody calculates business cases, it is also about estimating how much less of an existing asset you will use, right? And again, this is a very, very important example also. So let me give you how this works in real life with a real-time example, right? Glass manufacturing, and this can be applicable to anybody who owns a truck, owns a container, everybody, because it's important for distribution. So in glass manufacturing, anytime a glass is made or a glass pane is made, it is specifically transported in a equipment called a stillage. You have to have a stillage because you can't put a glass inside a pellet in a box. It has to be transported in a stillage. Now, when the stillages are procured, you only procure a certain number. And as per the shipment and as per the supply chain route, these stillages take the glasses and they're going to distribution, they're going to retail. So at any point in time in the supply chain, there are multiple stillages at multiple points in the supply chain. Now, for the planner or the dispatcher or the supply chain practitioner in the glass manufacturing company, they have to see how many shipments of my stillages or how many stillages I still have left in my factory and how many shipments I can guarantee next. Now, imagine doing this if you have no idea where your stillages are. The only idea you have is either through phone calls or tags, RFIDs, or even somebody updating this in the ERP. It's data, but it's not real-time or visible data. But if you have real-time visibility into it, you know for a fact that tomorrow I will get 5 stillages back or 5 trucks back or 5 containers back. I can then start optimizing for the next shipment. So even if it's a cheap and an affordable asset, in this case, it's a stillage, it is not affecting the production of my glass manufacturing. I do not run into a problem where I am manufacturing hundreds and hundreds of pieces of glasses, but I only have the capacity to transport 5 of them, 10, 20 of them, or 50% of them. It's never going to run into that problem. So that's where we come in. We optimize for inventory using location, using real-time data. We increase the visibility indoors as well as outdoors. Right? This is very important. A lot of time people think that you have to track, IoT tracking comes into when it's out in the open. It's really important to also figure out where an IoT device or an IoT asset is inside the warehouse. Right? So that's where we also come in. We increase the utilization and we also decrease any sort of instances where there is theft or loss because we identify the hotspots. Right? So this is the point, showing real-time data where we think location plays an extremely important role, right? And it's, even though the outcome and all this information might be fed into an ERP system or a business analytics system, this is the underpinning of improving efficiency and productivity into your business process. Right. Now, with that, I know we have not a lot of time. This is where I would like to end my presentation. I hope we were able to give you a consistent messaging across the discussion that we had and this presentation. And if there's any questions, we can of course take them in the Q&A if we have any time left. But I think that's enough from my side. Back to you, Rohit.
Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us for today's session. I want to first of all thank our speaker group for taking out the time from their incredibly busy schedule for this. I really appreciate your support. Secondly, I would like to thank our attendee group for their inquisitiveness. A lot of the questions you raised, and like I mentioned, if any other queries you have, you need any help, please feel free to write. I'm happy to connect. Okay, and lastly, I would like to thank our partner here, Technologies, for supporting this session. Really appreciate it. So that's it from our end for today. We will see you next. We are doing an event on connected commercial vehicles. So, very well related to, what we discussed today. And we will do that on 11th of December at 12:30 p.m. So I see you guys then, and I say a goodbye and I take your leave for now. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.